Hey, right now I'm outside of 208 Utah Street in San Francisco. We're going to go inside and meet everybody from Webflow. It's going to be pretty exciting. Alright, welcome to Webflow. Here we are. Oh, this is cool. Hello, Webflow. Nice. Look at this, I forgot my tripod, so we have to use a stack of books. Alright, what's up? We're with the Webflow guys. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'm Vlad. I'm the original co-founder of Webflow. Started with my brother Sergi and our friend Bryant.
So I'm Barrett, I'm on the marketing team here.
Oh, okay, cool. And what was it like having a startup with your brother?
So my brother and I have an amazing relationship. We actually ran Webflow as an agency before, where I was doing the coding, he was doing the design. Okay. He's 5 years younger than me, so we always had this. The brother that's closest to me, I kind of had a contentious relationship with.
Oh, interesting.
But Sergi, since we were so far apart, we, I don't know, just got along well, really. Right. And our skills kind of complement each other, where he would do crazy designs and then I would implement them and then kind of naturally fit into working at Webflow. Right. Because it was me just saying, hey, maybe it makes sense for us to build some software that lets you do what, you know, actually put into practice what you're designing without relying on me. Right. And it kind of...
So that's a great point. Let's talk about what Webflow is. And for you guys watching Dev Tips, you may have seen the video I did with Ren when I was in Israel. And he gave us a really quick demo of building something right with your tool. I've never seen it been done. It was like in front of me, and I was like laughing because it was like way easier than I thought it would be. Sure. So tell us, what is Webflow, and like why did you make it?
Sure. Initially, so you can think of Webflow as a website builder, but when you say that, people immediately think Wix, Squarespace, Weebly, all of these sort of consumery, pick a template, do something like that. It's nothing like that. So Webflow is essentially dev tools, what you see in a browser when you're working as a developer on HTML and CSS, but on crack, like taken to the next level, where we've essentially created an abstraction layer over HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and given designers that same level of power, we've just made it more approachable via visual interface. So it's the same thing that you would do as a developer in like a CSS style sheet or an HTML or JADE sort of markup file. You're just doing it in a different type of environment. So instead of typing, you know, div class whatever, you're actually dragging a div in, giving it like an HTML tag, and then adding a class.
Has this been done before, or something like this been done? Like
nothing
where
really.
Like the framework, the mental framework when you're building this, where does that come from?
That's a good question. I don't think every single attempt at this tried to abstract it way too far. So they try to take something like Photoshop and say, all right, we're going to generate code. Right. But that, so there have been many attempts at that. So Dreamweaver, Macaw, there's tons of them. Like Photoshop itself, you can right click and get some CSS out. But the mechanics of that are so, they don't match how people develop for the web or how you develop in production for the web, that you usually just get garbage. Like you just get something that can maybe be used to maybe copy like a, you know, a complex gradient or a shadow or whatever, but you still need to know exactly how to take that output and put it into some specific piece of code. And the insight for us was dev tools. Like we saw...
so that's the working model. Like, how do engineers use this palette? They open up the inspector. How do they use that to manipulate the page?
Right, and the inspector, right, the huge problem with the inspector is, A, you have to understand exactly where to go to find out what you're manipulating. So not only do you have to inspect, take that element and go find, you know, the styles or properties of that thing and go change it, but you also have to know to take that back to whatever source file. So Webflow it's got like that additional layer. Not only do you have like live reload, it's all immediate reload. There's no reload happening. It's that when you make that change, that's a direct manipulation of the source file. You don't have to like go back somewhere for it to reload. You're actually making that change directly.
Like how many times have I copied out of the inspector and pasted that in my CSS file?
So it's basically DevTools with the actual saving.
When Vlad first, when we started first talking about it, I was like, tell me exactly kind of what you just asked. Like, what was the kind of guided motivation? What was the vision? And what's always kind of stuck with me is when you talked about kind of the disconnect between traditionally like hand coding and then seeing the actual result, and how Webflow is basically you're just manipulating it and directly seeing the results right away. So there's like a one-to-one connection between the kind of like creative design aspects and then the actual, you know, in our case, not hand coding, but the manipulation of the page to create what your design is.
But you still have to know the core principles of the medium that you're designing for, right? Like most design tools would try to just hide this complexity and say you're just dragging boxes around. What that translates to in dev language is position absolute, left top. You know, everything's completely, it has a set width, and then that's how people are used to working in Sketch and Photoshop and pretty much every other design tool. In Webflow, we enforce designers to think like a web developer. You have to understand like nesting of components and elements. You have to understand that CSS classes that you set will cascade and inherit. You have to understand, for example, if you're working with Flexbox, you don't just like drag elements around and have them stick to a side. You have to think, okay, here's my Flex parent or Flex container and my Flex items, and here's how I want them to lay out. There's a one-to-one correlation between some CSS change and an action you take in Webflow. So
what I'm really gathering from this is like, the more you know code and the better you are at like understanding the way the DOM works and about how CSS is implemented, the actually better you are going to be in Webflow. Because you're directly manipulating those things as if they were those things, and not like move a box here and then it generates the magic backend.
So it's absolutely an advantage to know HTML and CSS up front to understanding Webflow, but it's not a direct requirement.
Okay.
So learning the principles behind the box model, for example, you know, if I'm introducing you to Sketch, I can just say, take this box shape tool and drag something and click on it and move it, right? You understand, and then put another, like copy paste the box and move that box around. It doesn't affect this box. In Webflow, you would say, you know, drag in two elements and add a class to one of them and set the margin, and you can see everything below it moving.
Right.
Just the principle of that, the box model, like the reflow of the page, is a core kind of aspect of the medium of the web that is pretty easy to understand, much easier to understand than, let's say, all the semantics that go into building a web page today, like knowing how to bootstrap grunt and gulp and whatever, like the plethora of things.
I think like my story, my like coming into using Webflow is like a pretty good indication of kind of how just using the UI, interacting with Webflow's UI, kind of teaches you the ways to think. It makes you a better kind of thinker in terms of how you build web pages. Like my old job, I'd taken some kind of introductory treehouse HTML and CSS. So going from nothing to, you know, basically understanding how a web page is built, but certainly not knowing like animations in CSS, et cetera, et cetera. But my kind of ability to build web pages however I want them to look has gone from, you know, in the slow lane, 25 miles an hour, to like screaming down the highway. And that's been amazing. And like the other day I was watching some of your videos about how to do CSS animations, and I was seeing like, okay, iterations infinite or iterations like 1, 2, and I was like, I've never seen that code before. But I knew that there's a checkbox in the animations in the Webflow UI, which is like loop or not loop. And I'm like, I see kind of exactly the kind of code that's being written when I'm manipulating animations and stuff in Webflow. So it's like, it's cool to like know. I think like if I were to reinvest time in learning code, I'd be way further along than I was when I had finished a course in the past, right?
So this could be an aid to learning, is kind of what you're saying?
We've had people learn to code through Webflow, and university programs actually use it as an introduction to web design, because you can see the direct code that's generated. We're playing around with what we call classes, but we have a slightly higher abstraction. We call them style blocks, where you know, you assign this class to an element, and then you can see exactly. You don't have to worry about, for example, putting the CSS into the right media query. You're almost dealing with states of that class. And when you look at the code that's generated, it's exactly what you would write if you were hand coding. And that's a great way for beginners to just have this direct manipulation of this canvas and seeing exactly what the resulting code would be. And a lot of times you can have like developers go head to head to somebody that, you know, knows Webflow or learned to code through Webflow, and somebody who was a traditional sort of web designer that's been doing this for years. And sometimes the web designers that have learned Webflow can go much faster, just because there's this, you know, you don't have to jump back and forth between it.
Go much faster using Webflow.
Yeah, exactly. Where even though they know how to code that same thing, they prefer the Webflow. Just like same reason people use DevTools sometimes
Sure.
to define a shadow or a gradient or something.
I remember
I've done it a million times.
there was a moment at my last job I was working on this box that had all these logos, and I was working with one of my coworkers who knew, he's a coder, but he had just been learning Flexbox, and we were kind of pair programming, writing it alongside, but we kept breaking it and kept ruining it. And then I learned how to use Webflow, and I was like, okay, let's try columns. Oh, let's try this. Justify middle. Okay, it's done.
Yeah.
Because I can just click it right away and have it be ready.
That's interesting.
So learning the principles of something like Flexbox, you can do a lot quicker because you can see it happening right on the side.
Would you say that there's anything you can do in code you can do in Webflow? Is that fair?
There's a threshold. So
Okay.
when we first started, 3.5 years ago when we first launched, out of everything you can do in web design, we could do 5%. We couldn't even do multiple pages, we couldn't do any sort of animations or transitions. Our goal right now is to get to 100% parity to what CSS and HTML allow you to do.
Yeah.
And we're among the first to launch things like 3D transforms, Flexbox. We're working on CSS grid support already, to where our parity to what you can do in CSS is 1-to-1. We do put some constraints on, really deeply nested CSS selectors, usually because it's bad practice to go down.
Oh, you limit how many?
For example, we don't allow nested classes unless they're class and tag based selectors. So it's inside of just to enforce, we want to move designers closer to a component based thinking in terms of CSS, where you don't have to worry about these crazy nested SAS driven style sheets that we have now, where you have to go all across your file to find CSS specificity conflicts or whatever. But right now there's an escape hatch. Anything that Webflow can't do, you just do it with custom code. So you essentially have an embed, or you implement that with code. But we're working, so we're kind of at the 80% mark right now, where for a lot of sites you can do 100% of what you need to do for that project. But if I was to say, the last 10 projects I had to work on, maybe 20% of them needed something custom. And most of those times, those custom things are a custom component or parallax or some crazy thing that we don't support yet. We're constantly catching up to where just a year ago we're at 5%, now a year later we're at 20%, now we're at 80%. So we're making these big leaps towards what Webflow is capable of as a superset of what CSS allows. And the huge thing we're working on right now is plugins. So anything that Webflow doesn't have, we'll have an open source plugin ecosystem that you can build as a React component and just plug it into Webflow, and that'll be fully visual. So something that we don't support is some crazy widget, slider, carousel, whatever, anything that you consider in the web component space, what you can build with React, you would be able to build as a developer once, plug that in as a plugin, and then now Webflow does that thing.
That's awesome. That was actually going to be my next question, is what's on the horizon for Webflow. But
that's the huge thing right now, plugins.
That's awesome.
Because that's what makes Webflow completely extensible. And the way that we're architecting the thing is with future compatibility with developers in mind, not just for developers to build those plugins, but the way that we're even persisting, the way that we store sites and applications in Webflow, the entire data model, the DOM structure, the CSS, is abstract in a way that we can have this UI on top of it that can edit it, but we can also write plugins to Atom, Sublime, Vim, that actually know the information around this more abstract way of representing this website or application, and actually sync it back to a code editor so that a designer and a person and a programmer can be editing at the same time in a totally different interface, right? A developer is adding a class via typing class name, and we can do a lot of enforcement there, this class doesn't exist, right? Where we have some type checking constraints, and somebody who's way more comfortable on the design side is working on the same exact project in real time in a visual way. That's maybe a year plus out, but that's the end result, where we see live collaboration on the real thing, not this facsimile that we have right now, where designers are okay, here's an approximation in a Photoshop or Sketch file, and the developers are doing the actual thing, where we see designers are actually really capable of coming up with production level prototypes
Right.
That can be like with a click of a button converted to production. That's not even a prototype.
That was some of the sentiment that I was gathering from the video that I did with Ran. People were saying that Webflow is really great for prototypes and things like that, but you're aiming towards production parity.
We are. We already have, in many cases, like I said, we're catching up in terms of full parity. We have real production apps that are taking like 500,000 requests a month with like crazy production traffic and a lot of different requirements, and those things are running completely on Webflow, built by one designer, somebody who doesn't know how to code, and maintained, run in production by a designer, which is pretty crazy to think about. Like that wasn't possible 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So if you look at our entire help center, run by our support team, not even designers, not developers.
So like just the CMS-driven help center, like hands off.
Yeah, exactly. And our entire template marketplace runs off of Webflow, built by Nate, our product designer. We've had entire companies start like with non-engineering talent run in production, and you can have a coder look at that code and ask, who was this built by?
It's like it's so impressive the things that people are able to build with it. Like what I always say is like if you can design it, you can build it with Webflow. And so we have a channel on our Slack channel that's like we call it In the Wild. It's just like the latest things that have been built that are just amazing. And everyone's like, that's incredible. Like, and it's just it's so great to see what people are able to make with it.
But the limitation now is that it's mostly good for read-only things. So if you have something like a user-based system, right, that's not possible with Webflow yet. It might be eventually. So you'll be able to build something like an Airbnb or like a Twitter, you know, prototype initially as like a first version. But right now it's more around like these marketing sites, WordPress level type of sites that have a lot of dynamic data in the background. I would actually say, since most developers work with designers, what a lot of developers are doing is they're translating the designer's intent into production code, right? What Webflow allows developers to do is say to designers, don't give me a sketch mockup that I have to like write all the code for. Give me like a working Webflow site or working Webflow UI. Then all I have to hook up, if anything, is like some dynamic aspects or some user interaction. Right. But the actual, you know, expressing something small, like when I hover over this button, I want to do some animation. How do you explain that in a sketch shop? You have to like sit next to the developer and
create a principle, you know.
Webflow allows designers to actually do that in the native environment of the web, and it's the final like CSS3 format that you would use that a developer would. And a lot of times developers don't even know how to do that kind of stuff. Like I've been in web development for 15 years, and a lot of the things that our designers have done with like our 3D transforms feature and our interactions UI, I wouldn't know where to start. Like I seriously, I see Webflow as kind of like 3D animation software. Right, 20 years ago, people had to understand vertex math, NURBS, non-uniform rational B-splines. Like these technical people had to do animation at Pixar. And then we created an abstraction layer like Maya, 3D Studio Max, where now creative people, they still have to understand like all these constraints, like how to build rigging systems and how to, but all this stuff is visual. Like they don't worry about how is the hair going to flow, they just have a hair system. So we've created these visual abstractions to help people harness the power of that medium. We're doing the same thing with Webflow, where we're taking everything that's possible on the web, and our idea is to be like the Xcode of web development, where designers go in and create what they imagine, and then maybe there's a little bit of hookup to like real databases or systems or whatever, but it's very close to the real thing, if not the real final thing.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for this time to like explain to us what we got going on here. I'm excited to jump in and try my hand at your tool. I've never used it before, so it's going to be like a fun partnership / exploration for me. So keep tuned for the next few videos where I'm going to be using the Webflow tool to build stuff for myself that I want to see a lot, living. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Keep on hacking. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for coming by.
All right. Dun dun dun. Videos.